Hello and welcome to this episode of the Book Drop series hosted by the Centre for Deliberative Democracy and Global Governance at the University of Canberra. I'm Jonathan Pickering. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow here at the Centre, and I'm very pleased to have as our guest today Frank Biermann, who's a research professor at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, based at the Copernicus Institute for Sustainable Development. And we'll be talking today a little bit about a couple of books that Frank has recently published, one on the Sustainable Development Goals and one about politics in the Anthropocene. So perhaps, Frank, if you'd like to say a few words briefly just about the two books, some of the key themes in...
Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much for inviting me also for this drop launch. There are two books which are, on the face of it, very different in a way, so totally different, but they're also very much related to some points. The one book is the Anthropocene Encounters. This is a book about a new concept, the Anthropocene. And in this book, we explore with many other authors together as an edited volume, we explored how the concept of the Anthropocene that was invented, introduced in our community around 2000, how this concept has affected a variety of disciplines, a variety of discourses, how it affected philosophy, how it affected theories of justice, how it affected democracy, how it affected science, for example. So we have many different communities, disciplines, areas of expertise and knowledge. And there we study in this book how the Anthropocene has been encountered in these communities as a new concept, as a new term. So this is a book more on the theoretical level, exploring the notion of the Anthropocene. And the other book is about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, but here more broadly about a new approach to governance, especially to global governance, the approach of governing through goals. We have in the history of global environmental governance a variety of approaches that have been explored. We have treaties, we have market systems, we have private governance, standard certification, etc. And now the United Nations have essentially embarked on a new approach, which is governing through goals, the setting of global goals, which are broad, that are to be specified by targets. There are 169 targets that are specifying 17 global goals. And we are interested in this book that was published in 2017 by MIT Press. We were interested how this new concept of governing through goals can work. I must say the book was published in 2017, so was essentially written around 2015, 2016. So this book will have not much information about the effectiveness of these goals, but it is a book that is trying to identify courses that can lead to the effectiveness of these goals, how they can work, and also how they are related to experiences that we have with other much more limited, much more focused goal-setting processes in the past, such as for the Millennium Development Goals that have been explored and agreed upon by the United Nations earlier. But just to ask also, to answer in a way your implicit question, whether these books are related to some extent. And I think there is a relationship, and this is that the Anthropocene challenges us to reconsider the way how we govern our societies. And the question is whether the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, can be an answer to some of the challenges of the Anthropocene, some of the governance challenges of the Anthropocene. And one is, for example, complexity. We know from many writings and texts on the Anthropocene that this new epoch and this new state in our societies is marked by a tremendous degree of complexity, where everything is related to everything else in a way where local, national, and global governance has to be integrated and interlinked. And maybe the SDGs can be an answer by providing guidance, by providing focus in these complex, diverse societal systems and governance systems that we experience today. Another potential link is justice. I mean, Anthropocene is essentially also a challenge of planetary justice within countries, among countries, between generations. And maybe the SDGs can also provide here some new approaches, for example, by the strong focus on the eradication of poverty and the ending of hunger. These very strong impetus that the SDGs are supposed to give to especially the eradication of poverty can be also an important part of the solution to the Anthropocene challenges. But just to conclude this, the Anthropocene means essentially that people are now driving one of the, even the most important factor in the development, in the evolution of this planet. And this is more or less the claim, the argument behind the Anthropocene claim. Anthropocene means it's the human planet, it's a planet that humans are shaping today. And what humans do not really have is much guidance about what do we want to do with this planet. I mean, what should be the future of the Earth? We are responsible, we have the power of shaping this planet, but what is the direction in which we should go? We can't go back to the Holocene. That's not really a possibility anymore, but what else? And here maybe the SDGs can provide a normative frame, a normative guidance that has been agreed by all the countries in the world as a kind of a common vision of what we as people want to do and achieve in this century on planet Earth. And so I think this is where SDGs and Anthropocene are very much related.
Oh, yeah. And I guess as you've written, the scale of the problem of the Anthropocene raises complex and potentially unprecedented governance challenges, and it raises challenges at the conceptual level as well to ideas of democracy, justice, and so on. Thinking particularly about democracy, given that we're often used to thinking about democracy at, say, national or subnational levels, how well do you think the idea of democracy and institutions for democracy are equipped to deal with the challenges of the Anthropocene? And do you think that democracy is still necessary or possible in the Anthropocene, in circumstances of planetary emergency? Is it really a luxury that we can't afford anymore? Or is it perhaps at least as important as it always has been?
Well, that's certainly, I think it would be difficult to find somebody who would argue that democracy is no longer needed. The Anthropocene is a challenge for democracy, there's no doubt, but I think there is no alternative to democracy either. Challenges are numerous. I mean, to put it this way, local, national, and global level. And I think the most important challenge maybe is the challenge, well, I wouldn't say actually most important, everything is important these days, but I think one challenge is the global challenge. I mean, the challenge of reinventing democracy at the global level, because it is clear Anthropocene is a transformation process of the entire planet. It affects the entire planet. The Earth systems are largely integrated, interlinked at the global scale. Climate change is a classical example, but we have many others. And this requires decision at the global level. And we have still a system where our societies are organized in 193 nation states. Many of them have democratic national systems, not all, but most have. But how these countries can collaborate in a democratic fashion is still one of the big research questions and also a big political question. We have the United Nations, which is in some ways still following the systems of the 20th century, if not even the 19th centuries, one country, one vote. That means a country such as Luxembourg or Liechtenstein, Andorra and Monaco, they have the same vote as China or India, which is probably not acceptable for large countries. But what are the alternatives to these kind of decision making? Consensus is very important still in many environmental treaties. And consensus means that decisions are always held hostage by the least interested and the least demanding country. But what are the alternatives? I mean, one discussion has been to bring in, for example, more civil society, which is very much supported by many environmental researchers, also by civil society organizations. But the problem is that, for example, the funding of many civil society organizations is essentially from the rich developed countries. And this does not necessarily influence the agenda of these groups, but it causes also certain concerns in terms of democracy if organizations that essentially are financed by some communities and some societies are given a much larger role, a much larger input. I give you one example, which we have studied now in Utrecht in collaboration with Lund. It's also very new and very hot topic, is geoengineering, for example. I mean, I'm not supporting this, but it's a topic that has so much attention these days. There are research groups that are engaging in field experiments on solar radiation management, for example. And so in the last 1 or 2 years, there's so much support on these kind of approaches that they warrant more study also from the political science and also from the deliberative democracy community, I would say. Because the problem is, how would you ever govern such a mechanism? For example, solar radiation management is a technology that can be done by very few countries, if not even one country, if not even a private actor. But who would stop this actor? How would a decision-making procedure be formed if one country or one private actor wants to engage, for example, in solar radiation management? What would be the decision-making procedures? And how would countries agree on this? What would happen with disagreement concerns? What kind of deliberation could be engaged to deal with these kind of issues, also in the intergenerational context, for example? How would we hold actors that are engaging in these technologies and these processes accountable? These are fundamental questions and challenges for democracy that we have not really resolved. I mean, there is no blueprint, I would argue, and there are a number of developments. The SDGs, for example, have been agreed by the United Nations, but in a process that was much more participatory than probably anything else that has ever been agreed by the United Nations. There's a lot of consultation, both physically in meetings, but also by online consultations and all kind of other means. So there's a transformation happening in a way, but it's not a transformation that is not raising concerns in terms of new relationships of power, new relationships of authority and inequality that are maybe being formed at these global levels.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks very much for a very stimulating discussion. And please look out for the 2 books. Or I think we have a copy, in fact, of one, Anthropocene Encounters. This is co-edited with Eva Lövbrand, and Governing Through Goals, which we only have in electronic copy, so we can't show you on the video, but it's with MRT, co-edited with Norichika Kanie. So great. Well, thank you very much for watching, and thanks a lot, Frank.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. Thank you.